"Sorry, sir," one said with a professional but cold tone. "This event is private. You'll need an invitation or name on the list." The night glittered over Manhattan like it had dressed for the event itself. Limousines purred in a slow procession beneath the golden lights of the Grand Orpheus Hotel. Camera flashes sliced through the winter air as guests stepped out, shimmering in designer gowns and crisp tuxedos. The city's elite had gathered, tech founders, venture capitalists, and investors whose names moved markets. Outside the main entrance, a man stood in a black crew neck, jeans, and clean white sneakers. No security escort, no tailored suit, no flash of wealth. He could have been anyone, a delivery guy, a driver waiting for his client, or a lost stranger looking for directions. But his eyes told another story. Calm, deep, and observant. The kind of gaze that had seen struggle, learned patience, and built something powerful without needing applause. His name was Elias Ward. 34. Founder and CEO of Ward Technologies and Investments, a firm that had quietly reshaped the city's tech infrastructure. His company funded startups, built data systems for city transit, and had ownership stakes in nearly every major tech corridor on the East Coast. Half of those glittering towers in the skyline bore his unseen influence. Yet, no one knew the man behind it. And that anonymity suited him. Elias wasn't interested in being a celebrity CEO. He'd spent too long fighting to be taken seriously to now crave validation. But tonight was special. His team had organized the annual gala, a night meant to honor partnerships, progress, and the 10-year mark since Ward Technologies began in a one-bedroom apartment in Harlem. He smiled faintly at the memory of those early days, coding until sunrise, eating ramen, pitching ideas to investors who smiled politely but never called back. The same men who now called him sir when they needed funding. Life had a way of coming full circle. He walked toward the Grand Hotel doors, his steps steady, confident yet unhurried. But before he could reach the entrance, 2 uniformed security guards stepped forward, blocking his path. "Sorry, sir," one said with a professional but cold tone. "This event is private. You'll need an invitation or name on the list." Elias nodded lightly. "I'm here for the Ward Technologies anniversary gala." The guard raised an eyebrow. "Right. And you are?" "Elias Ward." There was a small pause, followed by a brief chuckle from the second guard. "Sure you are," he said, eyes scanning Elias's simple outfit. "Look, sir, this is a black tie event. You might have taken a wrong turn. Maybe check the bar downstairs." A couple walking past overheard and glanced at him, eyes flicking from his sneakers to his skin tone before walking faster. The woman whispered something behind her hand. Elias exhaled slowly. It wasn't anger that filled him, just that quiet, familiar weight of being underestimated. He had met that tone 1,000 times before, the voice that didn't say you don't belong here outright, but made sure you felt it. He could have ended it right there. One phone call, one word, and the hotel staff would have tripped over themselves apologizing. But that wasn't his style. He kept his composure. "I believe my name should be on the list," he said calmly. The first guard sighed, checking his tablet. "Name again?" "Elias Ward." The guard scrolled, then shook his head. "Sorry, no Elias Ward on the guest list. You might want to contact whoever invited you." Elias tilted his head slightly. "That would be me." The guard gave a dry laugh. "Okay, buddy. Have a good night." He stepped aside and gestured politely toward the sidewalk, the universal signal for move along. Elias looked at the glass doors behind them, where flashes of light and laughter spilled out. Through the crystal reflection, he saw the world that claimed to celebrate innovation and diversity, yet still measured a man by his clothes before his character. He didn't argue. He didn't flash his ID. He simply nodded, stepped aside, and pulled out his phone. Inside, on the top floor, his assistant Olivia was scanning the crowd nervously. "He's late," she whispered to a colleague. "Mr. Ward should have been here 30 minutes ago." Her phone buzzed. A message from Elias, "They won't let me in." Her heart dropped. What? She texted back. Security? Why? Because I'm wearing jeans, he replied. Olivia's fingers flew across her phone. Stay there. I'm coming down. Moments later, the elevator doors opened and she hurried out, heels clicking against marble. When she saw Elias standing outside, leaning casually against a pillar, she froze between shock and guilt. Sir, they didn't know, I'll fix this immediately. Elias smiled lightly. Relax, Olivia. You didn't do anything wrong. She turned sharply toward the guards. Do you even realize who you're speaking to? This is Elias Ward, the CEO of the company hosting the event you're guarding. The guards exchanged glances. Their faces drained of color. Mr. Ward, we're so sorry, sir, one stammered. We just didn't. Elias raised a hand. It's fine. You were doing your job. He stepped past them, through the glass doors that had once seemed impenetrable, and into the golden warmth of the gala hall. The laughter dimmed slightly as people turned. Conversations paused. They had seen his photo on Forbes once or twice, but few had ever met him in person. And now, seeing him enter casually dressed, with quiet confidence instead of spectacle, it unsettled them. He wasn't the kind of rich they expected. He didn't perform it. As he walked through the crowd, whispers followed. That's him, someone murmured. The Ward guy. You're kidding. He looks like, no way he's the CEO. He ignored them, heading straight for the podium where the event host froze mid-sentence, unsure whether to continue or step aside. Elias took the microphone with a nod. The crowd fell into silence. Good evening, he said. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but I thought I'd share something personal. He paused, scanning the sea of faces, the powerful, the privileged, the ones who decided what progress looked like. 10 years ago, he began, I stood outside buildings like this, hoping someone inside would listen to an idea that could change the world. I dressed up in borrowed suits, rehearsed my pitch, and still got turned away at the door, not because my idea wasn't good enough, but because people assumed I wasn't. The room grew still. Even the clinking glasses stopped. Tonight, he continued, voice even, I came casually because I wanted to see if things had changed. They haven't, not much. Gasps murmured through the crowd. Olivia watched him, pride swelling behind her eyes. Elias smiled faintly. I don't say that to embarrass anyone. I say it as a reminder, success doesn't always come dressed in a suit. Respect shouldn't depend on the label on a jacket. And worth shouldn't depend on the color of a man's skin. For a moment, no one moved. The truth had landed like a stone in still water, rippling through layers of pretense. Then the applause came, hesitant at first, then rising like a wave. Some clapped out of guilt, others out of genuine admiration. But Elias didn't need any of it. He handed the mic back to the host and walked toward the balcony, away from the noise. The city lights blinked below, towers he partly owned, streets he had walked when he had nothing but ambition. Olivia joined him quietly. You handled that with grace, sir. He smiled. Grace is cheaper than anger. Costs less, too. She laughed softly, the tension easing. Still, they'll never forget this night. They shouldn't, he said. Because sometimes people need to be reminded that power doesn't announce itself. It just walks in quietly and owns the building. They stood there for a moment, watching the skyline. The same city that once rejected him now glittered with his legacy. And deep down, he knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about progress, the kind that starts not with others changing, but with you refusing to break when they doubt you. He remembered his mother's voice from years ago, when they lived in a cramped apartment that smelled of determination and instant noodles. Eli, she used to say, you'll never need to shout to prove your worth. Let your work speak until they have no choice but to listen. Tonight, her words echoed in the city lights. The guards at the door had done what the world often did, judged the surface, ignored the substance. But Elias knew something they didn't: doors close on those who wait for validation, but they open wide for those who build their own keys. He looked over the city one last time and smiled. The moral wasn't about anger. It was about self-worth. True power, he thought, isn't about forcing people to recognize you, it's about knowing who you are even when they don't. Long before the chandeliers and applause, before the skyline reflected his name, there was only a one-bedroom apartment in Harlem with flickering lights and a second-hand laptop that overheated after 20 minutes of use. Elias Ward had nothing but a mind that wouldn't rest and a dream that refused to die quietly. He had grown up watching his mother work double shifts at a diner and then take night classes, chasing a nursing degree long after everyone told her it was too late. His father had left when he was 6, promising he'd be back when things got better. They never did. So Elias learned early that if he wanted something, he'd have to build it himself. He started coding at 15, not because he wanted to be a tech genius, but because the library computer was the only place that made sense to him. Lines of code were predictable. People weren't. At 19, he got a scholarship to a local university, one of those programs meant to increase diversity in tech. He was grateful, but he noticed quickly that gratitude came with invisible strings. Professors called him inspiring, but classmates rarely invited him to study groups. When he answered questions too quickly, someone would mutter, "Relax, bro, we get it, you're the token." Still, Elias stayed focused. He didn't argue, didn't waste energy explaining himself. He simply outworked everyone. While they were out partying, he was building small software tools for local businesses, invoicing apps, tracking systems, anything that could bring in a little cash. But the moment that defined him came in his senior year. He pitched an idea to an investor panel, a predictive data algorithm that could identify market shifts in real time. It was innovative, scalable, and ahead of its time. He'd spent 6 months coding and testing it, sleeping 3 hours a night, surviving on instant coffee and stubbornness. The panel of investors, all older, white men in pressed suits, listened politely. Then one of them leaned back and said, "Interesting idea. But I think you should find a stronger team to lead the business side. Maybe someone with experience in finance, someone who looks the part." Elias stared at him. "You mean someone who doesn't look like me?" The man smiled thinly. "Don't take it that way. I'm just saying, presentation matters." That was the night Elias realized something important: brilliance wasn't enough. The world wasn't fair, and waiting for permission was another form of surrender. So he stopped asking. After graduation, he rented a tiny office space above a laundromat and called it Ward Technologies. It sounded bigger than it was: just him, one used desk, and a $2,000 loan from his mother. Every rejection after that became fuel. When banks refused him, he studied finance. When clients ghosted him, he learned sales. When big firms copied his ideas, he learned how to patent, how to protect, how to outlast. He didn't want pity. He wanted proof. And proof came slowly. His first client was a small logistics company in Brooklyn struggling with inventory tracking. He built them a system in 3 weeks that saved them thousands. They told their friends. Word spread. Soon, he wasn't chasing clients, they were chasing him. But success didn't erase prejudice, it only disguised it. At meetings, he was often mistaken for the intern or IT help. More than once, potential partners asked him to bring the CEO when he already was the CEO. He smiled through it. Because deep down, he knew something they didn't: underestimation is the most powerful advantage a man can have. By 27, Ward Technologies had grown from 1 man to a team of 20. He'd moved out of Harlem into a modest apartment downtown, but he never forgot where he came from. He hired young coders from underfunded schools, offering them mentorship and shares instead of just salaries. When journalists finally caught on to his success, the headlines read, "The silent disruptor and the CEO who doesn't show off." But the truth was simpler: Elias didn't need to prove he was successful. He needed to prove that you could build greatness without becoming what the world expected you to be. Then came the offer that would change everything. A global tech conglomerate wanted to buy his company. They offered $200 million, more money than he'd ever imagined. His board urged him to take it. "You can start something new," they said. "Cash out. Enjoy your life." He almost did. But one night, standing on his balcony overlooking the city, he remembered something his mother once told him: if you sell your purpose for comfort, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to buy it back. The next morning, he declined the offer. Instead, he pivoted. He turned Ward Technologies from a software company into a tech investment empire, funding small, minority-owned startups, buying stakes in infrastructure projects, building tech centers in neighborhoods that corporate America ignored. Within 5 years, his company became the backbone of the city's digital infrastructure. Data systems, transport logistics, financial analytics, all quietly powered by Ward Tech's technology. He became the invisible force behind the skyline. But success has its shadows. The more powerful he grew, the more people tried to define him. The media wanted to label him the Black Elon Musk, investors wanted him to speak for every black entrepreneur, activists wanted him to fund their causes. But Elias refused to be boxed in by anyone's expectations. He wasn't a symbol. He was a man with his own path and his own demons. Because power doesn't erase pain, it just hides it better. There were nights he'd stare out at the city lights and still feel like that kid in Harlem, hoping someone would take him seriously. There were moments of exhaustion, lawsuits from competitors, betrayals from partners who smiled to his face and sold him out behind closed doors. He learned that in business, the knives rarely came from enemies. They came from people who once cheered you on. The worst came when one of his earliest investors, a man who had once pretended to believe in him, leaked false reports claiming Ward Tech manipulated data for contracts. The scandal hit headlines overnight. Stocks dipped. Clients panicked. Elias could have fought publicly. But instead, he chose silence, not weakness, but wisdom. He released one statement: integrity needs no defense. Time will speak. 3 months later, the truth surfaced. The investor was caught fabricating evidence. Elias didn't just recover, he thrived. His company's valuation tripled. That was when people started calling him untouchable. But Elias didn't feel untouchable. He just felt older. Tired, maybe, of being both the inspiration and the test case for people's biases. Still, he pushed forward. Because he knew what every great dreamer eventually learns: success isn't the destination, it's the proof that you didn't quit. He built, expanded, and reinvested. By 34, Ward Technologies owned major shares in city infrastructure projects, renewable energy startups, and AI-based logistics firms. His influence quietly touched every corner of the city, from streetlights to skyscrapers. And yet, when he showed up casually to his own gala, he was treated like a stranger. That was the irony life loved most: people respect you only when you look the part. But Elias had stopped dressing for acceptance a long time ago. He remembered once being asked in an interview, "What's the secret to your success?" He had smiled and said, "Knowing that every closed door isn't rejection, it's redirection." The interview had nodded, thinking it was a soundbite. But Elias had meant it. Because that's what his life had been: a series of locked doors he refused to stop knocking on. And sometimes, he didn't knock. He built his own. That night, after the gala, as he stood on his penthouse balcony, he thought about all those years of pushing through doubt. Not just from others, from himself, too. There were days he'd wake up and feel like an imposter. Days when exhaustion whispered, "You've made enough, rest now," and pride whispered, "They still don't respect you." But between those two voices, there was always another, quieter, truer: keep building. Because greatness isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to keep going. And that's the truth most people miss: success isn't loud. It's disciplined. It's the quiet mornings when you choose to keep going despite every reason not to. Elias looked down at the city that once doubted him. Now it ran on his code, his systems, his vision. And yet, he still walked among them like any other man. Because real power, he had learned, doesn't crave recognition. It creates change, whether people notice or not. He smiled faintly, finishing his glass of water. The night air was cool, crisp, and familiar, the same city, the same man, just a different altitude. And beneath the glow of the skyline, his mother's words returned once more, "Never forget, Eli, humility is wealth that money can't buy." He whispered it to himself like a prayer. The world might still see color before character. But Elias had already learned the one truth that kept him unstoppable: you can't control how they see you, only how you move when they don't. And that, more than power or money, was freedom. The city never really slept, it only changed rhythms. By day it roared, by night it hummed like an engine cooling after victory. Elias Ward stood in the glass-walled conference room on the 59th floor of the Horizon Tower, the headquarters of Ward Technologies. 10 years of quiet building had brought him here, a skyline view of everything he once dreamed of. But tonight wasn't a celebration. It was war disguised as business. Across the long table sat Gavin Royce, his former co-founder. Gavin had been with Elias from the beginning, the smooth-talking finance graduate who could charm investors and close deals while Elias built the technology. Together they had launched Ward and Royce Innovations, and for a brief time they were unstoppable. Then the offers came, and so did greed. Gavin wanted to sell early, take the cash, and walk away. Elias wanted to build something lasting. The disagreement turned ugly. Gavin walked out, sold his shares for cheap, and told anyone who'd listened that Elias would never survive without him. Now, 5 years later, Gavin had resurfaced, older, louder, and running a flashy AI company that promised to revolutionize predictive systems. Only one problem: the core algorithm was a stolen replica of Elias's original design. Ward Technologies had discovered it weeks ago. Instead of suing immediately, Elias decided to confront him face-to-face at an upcoming innovation summit, a televised event attended by global investors and streamed to millions. His board thought it was risky. Elias thought it was poetic. On the night of the summit, the ballroom glittered with ambition. Every table was a battlefield of egos, every spotlight a weapon. Gavin Royce took the stage first, smiling like a man who believed the world belonged to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gavin began, "tonight I present the future of market prediction, the most advanced AI of our time." Slides flashed behind him. Graphs. Code snippets. Phrases about innovation and disruption. The crowd clapped on cue. Elias sat near the back, dressed simply again, black suit, no tie, quiet confidence. Most people didn't notice him until the moderator said, "Next, we have Mr. Elias Ward, founder of Ward Technologies." A murmur rippled through the audience. Gavin's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. Elias walked to the stage, movements unhurried, voice calm. "Good evening," he said. "I came here tonight not to compete, but to clarify." He turned toward Gavin. "Mr. Royce and I once worked together. What you just saw, that algorithm, began as a dream in a small Harlem apartment. A dream I built line by line." The audience shifted. Cameras zoomed in. Gavin's jaw tightened. Elias continued, "When people talk about innovation, they often think of money or fame. But real innovation comes from hunger, from the people who stay up at 3 a.m. with nothing but an idea and the belief that it matters." He tapped the tablet in his hand. The screens behind him changed. Side-by-side code comparisons appeared, one from Ward Tech's archived files, one from Gavin's new system. Identical. The crowd gasped. Gavin's PR team froze. "This," Elias said quietly, "is what happens when ambition loses its soul." Security moved slightly toward the stage, uncertain. The moderator tried to interject, but Elias raised a hand. "It's all right. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to remind every creator in this room, never give away your vision just because someone else wears a better suit." Silence. Then applause, hesitant, then thunderous. Gavin tried to speak, words tumbling into the microphone. That's a misunderstanding. Data overlaps. Elias looked at him gently, almost sadly. No misunderstanding, Gavin. You taught me something valuable years ago. Some people chase the light, others build it. I chose to build. He turned to the audience. The world will always try to tell you who deserves success. It'll measure you by your accent, your clothes, your color. But remember, the same world that doubts you today will quote you tomorrow. The applause returned, louder this time. Gavin lowered his eyes, the spotlight no longer flattering. When the summit ended, reporters swarmed. Questions, flashes, microphones, chaos. Elias gave only one statement: integrity scales faster than any technology. He left quietly, slipping through the back exit into the cold night. Outside, rain misted the streets. Olivia met him by the car. That was powerful, she said. He shook his head lightly. Necessary. You could have destroyed him completely, she said. Elias looked out at the wet pavement reflecting city lights. I didn't build all this to destroy people. I built it to prove it's possible. They drove through downtown, the neon glow painting the windshield. He watched people hurrying under umbrellas, delivery riders, night shift workers, street vendors still packing up. Those were his people, the ones he still worked for. He thought about Gavin, about how easy it was to lose yourself chasing validation. Once, Gavin had been his brother in ambition. But somewhere along the road, pride had taken the driver's seat. Elias had learned the opposite path, the slower, quieter one where success didn't scream, it spoke through consistency. At home that night, he poured a glass of water and opened his old laptop, the same one from the Harlem apartment, still scratched and faintly humming. He kept it as a reminder. He scrolled through old code files and smiled. The logic was messy, the structure crude. But it was real. It was his. A notification pinged. News headlines already read: CEO exposes data theft live on stage, class and composure win the night. He closed the tab. He didn't need the praise. The lesson mattered more than the headlines. He thought back to the moment when Gavin had laughed years ago, saying, "You'll never survive in this industry without me." Maybe he was right, Elias hadn't survived. He'd evolved. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, whispering to himself, the world doesn't change when you win. It changes when you stay kind after winning. That was the part people missed. Real power wasn't loud. It was the choice not to retaliate when you easily could. The next week, Gavin's company collapsed under lawsuits. Elias didn't file any. Others did. Karma handled the rest. Meanwhile, Ward Technologies grew stronger. New partners reached out, impressed not by his victory, but by his dignity. And dignity, Elias realized, compounds like interest. The more you keep it, the richer your legacy becomes. He spent the next few days visiting the neighborhoods that had shaped him, the old library where he learned to code, the diner where his mother once worked double shifts. He slipped large donations anonymously, refusing to attach his name. Because his mother had taught him that charity with applause isn't kindness, it's marketing. As he walked through the streets, people nodded politely, unaware of who he was. And he liked it that way. To them, he was just another man in a hoodie walking home through Harlem. But to himself, he was a man at peace, a man who had faced prejudice, betrayal, and ambition's poison, and still managed to keep his soul intact. That night, standing once more on his balcony, he watched lightning flicker over the skyline. He thought about every closed door, every insult, every laugh that had once cut deep. All of it had been fuel. He whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone specific, just to the journey. Because he understood now that the people who doubt you are part of the process. Without them, you'd never grow strong enough to prove yourself. The rain stopped, the clouds parted, and the city lights sharpened below, the same city that had once turned him away at its own door. He smiled faintly and said to no one, "Let them underestimate you. It's the quietest advantage in the world." The moral was simple: never let betrayal make you bitter, let it make you better. The meeting room smelled of polished oak, leather, and tension. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a city that glittered with ambition, oblivious to the battles fought in its shadows. Elias Ward sat at the head of a massive conference table, calm as ever, but inside, the weight of the decision pressed like the skyline itself. Across from him sat government officials, their suits immaculate, their smiles practiced. Behind them, lawyers and lobbyists scribbled notes, whispering numbers and deadlines that could reshape the country's surveillance infrastructure. "This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity," said one of the officials, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard. Ward Technologies would be responsible for integrating the city's, and eventually the state's, entire public safety network. Cameras, AI monitoring, predictive policing algorithms. Your technology could save lives. Elias leaned back, studying the man. "And the cost to privacy?" he asked. The official's smile didn't waver. "Minimal. We have safeguards. It's for the greater good." Elias shook his head slightly. "We've all heard that before." It had been a dream offer, one that could cement Ward Technologies' legacy forever. Billions in revenue, exclusive contracts, influence that reached Washington itself. The board members had been ecstatic. They wanted him to sign immediately, to close the deal before competitors even blinked. But Elias knew better. He had built his empire not to exploit, but to empower. He remembered his mother's worn hands, the long nights in the apartment above the laundromat, the promise he had made to himself never to let power cost humanity. He'd seen what minimal safeguards really meant. When technology becomes detached from ethics, the people it claims to protect become invisible. Neighborhoods he loved, communities he had walked as a boy, could be subjected to constant surveillance, misused by those chasing profit or control. "Let me be clear," he said slowly, his voice steady. "We didn't build Ward Technologies to monitor the lives of ordinary citizens under the guise of safety. That isn't innovation. That's exploitation." The officials exchanged looks. One leaned forward. "Elias, you're a visionary. You know how this could position you and your company. We're talking about saving lives, about shaping the future." Elias's eyes scanned the room, landing on the board members trying to hide their frustration. He loved them, trusted them, but he would not bend principle for applause. "Saving lives," he said, "doesn't require turning neighborhoods into fishbowls. It doesn't require fear dressed as progress." A young board member whispered, "Sir, this deal could triple our revenue." Elias ignored him. "I know what it could do. I also know what it could destroy." The room went quiet. The tension was a living thing. The kind of moment every CEO faces at some point, when the world's definition of success collides with your own ethics. He thought back to Harlem, to the library, to the nights coding until his fingers bled on keyboards and his mind refused sleep. This was why he had endured all of it, not for wealth, not for recognition, but for control over his own legacy. Legacy wasn't built by following others' definitions of success. It was built by standing firm when the easy path glowed like gold. Another official's voice cut in, sharper this time. "Elias, if you decline, others will take the contract. Competitors will implement the technology anyway. Are you willing to let that happen?" He smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But if others misuse it, that isn't my failure. My responsibility is to act correctly, not to chase a headline or a dollar." One of the board members finally spoke, frustration lacing his voice. "You've built this empire. People look up to you. This is the moment to show real leadership." Elias stood. The room seemed to shrink under his quiet presence. Leadership isn't measured by the size of a contract. It's measured by the courage to say no when yes would cost what you believe in. "I built this company to improve lives, not to monitor them." There was a pause, the kind that stretched into eternity. Everyone felt the weight of it, the officials, the board, the lobbyists. Then he walked out. Not dramatically, not for show, but with the same quiet strength he had always carried. Outside the glass doors, Olivia was waiting, her expression a mixture of awe and relief. "Sir," she began. He shook his head, smiling faintly. No deal is worth losing the reason I started this company. Remember that, Olivia, there's always a price to pay when you compromise principle, and it's never worth it. The city skyline reflected in the lobby's marble floor, distant lights flickering like stars. He felt the familiar pulse of accomplishment, not from money earned, but from integrity maintained. That night, he walked home through streets he had known as a child, unnoticed by the world. People bustled past, absorbed in their own lives, unaware of the man who had just turned down billions for the greater good. And he liked it that way. At home, he poured water into a glass and sat at his old workstation, a reminder of beginnings, of nights spent coding and dreaming. He opened a file labeled Community AI, a project designed to improve urban safety through ethical, transparent means. Cameras would alert city services to fires, accidents, or emergencies, never for surveillance, never for control. He began reviewing the code again, refining it. Because real change, he knew, wasn't delivered in headlines or contracts. It was delivered one line of code, one ethical choice at a time. Over the next few weeks, the world learned of his decision. Headlines speculated, some praising him, others questioning his judgment. Investors were nervous. Competitors smirked. But Elias didn't read the articles. He didn't need validation. His satisfaction came from knowing he had acted in alignment with his principles. Late one evening, Olivia joined him in the office. "People are calling you crazy for turning down the contract," she said. He chuckled softly. "Crazy is easy. Difficult is standing up for what's right when it costs you everything else." She nodded. "You could have been even richer, more influential." He looked at her, calm but resolute. Influence isn't worth much if it's bought with fear or compromises the people it's meant to serve. Real power grows from restraint, from integrity. And she understood. That was why they worked together, because Ward Technologies was more than a company. It was a mission. A testament that ethics could scale, that success didn't have to erode the soul. Later that night, Elias stood once again on his balcony. The surveillance towers that others might have abused gleamed in the distance, reminders of choices not made. Below, the city moved unaware, alive, free, for now. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, "Let this city know that power isn't measured by what you control, but by what you choose not to misuse." The moral was clear: sometimes, the bravest decision isn't to take the offer, the fame, or the money, it's to stand firm when temptation glows the brightest. Because wealth and influence can build empires, but integrity builds legacies. Elias smiled faintly. Money could buy technology, contracts, and headlines. It could not, however, buy the quiet satisfaction of knowing you had done what was right, the kind of satisfaction that shines brighter than any city skyline. And as the night stretched into the early hours, the city slept beneath him, unaware, alive, and untouched by the temptation that had tested even the most powerful CEO. Elias Ward returned to his workstation, the faint hum of servers like a heartbeat. Outside, lights blinked, cars hummed, and the city pulsed. Inside, he coded for a future where technology served humanity, not the other way around. And in that choice, he found peace. The city was alive with anticipation. Headlines buzzed with speculation: who is Elias Ward, the invisible CEO who built half the skyline, Ward Technologies, the man behind the machines? Elias had never sought the spotlight. He had built empires quietly, let his work speak, and trusted that one day the truth would catch up with him. Tonight, at the annual Global Innovation Summit, it would. He walked into the grand ballroom dressed simply yet sharply, a black suit, crisp shirt, no tie. Cameras flashed as guests turned. Investors whispered. Media crews snapped photos, curious about the man whose name they had read but whose face they had rarely seen. And then they saw him, the man who had been denied entry at his own gala years ago, the self-made CEO whose empire had quietly shaped the city around them. He paused at the entrance, letting the recognition ripple through the crowd. Faces shifted from polite curiosity to shock. Some smiled nervously. Others froze, realizing they had underestimated him, dismissed him, or ignored his quiet assent. Elias moved forward with confidence, every step deliberate. He approached the podium, silence falling as he tapped the microphone. The lights dimmed slightly, casting a glow over the polished room. "Good evening," he began, voice calm and steady, resonating through the hall. "Some of you know me. Some of you don't. But I'm here to tell you a story, not of technology, not of investments, but of belief." He paused, letting the room lean in. Cameras captured every gesture. 10 years ago, he continued, I stood outside buildings like this, hoping to be noticed, hoping someone would believe in an idea that could change the world. I was denied. I was underestimated. I was judged by my clothes, my age, and the color of my skin. And that judgment was not wrong. It was honest. It showed me the world I would have to navigate, and the man I would have to become. Whispers moved through the audience. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Investors who had once scoffed at casual jeans now listened intently. I built Ward Technologies not to impress you, he said, not to fit into your definitions of success. I built it to create opportunities where there were none, to invest in people who had been overlooked, to shape a city and a future quietly, with integrity and persistence. Behind him, slides projected images of neighborhoods transformed by Ward Technologies projects, tech hubs for students, urban gardens with AI-assisted irrigation, small business support systems, and transparent community networks. Each project represented real change, not just headlines. He looked out at the audience, eye steady, voice unwavering. The lesson I've learned is simple: the world will judge you based on appearances. Don't fight them. Build anyway. Innovate anyway. Lead anyway. Your worth is not what others see, it's what you create when no one is watching. From the back, Olivia watched him, pride evident in her expression. She had seen every struggle, every sleepless night, every moment Elias could have quit. And he hadn't. Then he shifted his gaze to one corner of the room. Gavin Royce sat there, older now, more subdued. His attempt to mock or compete years ago had ended in failure. Tonight, he watched Elias dominate a stage not with arrogance, but with authority, dignity, and quiet power. Elias smiled faintly. To those who doubted me, who underestimated me, or who denied me entry into rooms that were always meant for me, I say this: the real victory isn't in proving them wrong. The real victory is in never losing yourself. Applause erupted, growing into a standing ovation. Cameras captured the moment, live streaming to millions who would share it across social media, trending hashtags glowing on screens, #Elias Ward, #Integrity Wins, #the Invisible CEO. He stepped down from the podium, moving through the audience with humility, shaking hands, exchanging nods, and acknowledging innovators, students, and community leaders whose lives he had quietly touched. Later, he went backstage, away from the cameras and the crowd, to speak with some of his earliest mentees, young engineers and entrepreneurs he had supported since their first pitches. They were awed but not intimidated. To them, he was proof that hard work, vision, and ethics mattered more than flashy suits or public approval. A young woman asked him, "Mr. Ward, how did you stay strong when people judged you, denied you, or betrayed you?" Elias looked at her, calm and reflective. "I didn't focus on them. I focused on what I could control: my work, my choices, my integrity. The world will always judge you. That's its nature. Your job is to build anyway, to persist anyway, and to lead in a way that leaves a legacy worth more than applause." He left the summit quietly, stepping out into the crisp night air, the city skyline gleaming like a map of every challenge he had faced and overcome. He walked through the streets unnoticed by most, just another man in the glow of streetlights, but he knew the truth: his influence, his impact, and his values had reached farther than most could see. In his penthouse that night, he opened the window, letting the wind sweep over him. He thought about the gala years ago, when a guard had denied him entry for wearing jeans. He thought about Gavin, the ex-partner who once betrayed him. He thought about the government contract, the pressure, and the temptation to compromise. He smiled quietly. Every test had only strengthened him. Every challenge had reinforced the principles he refused to abandon. He poured himself a glass of water, then turned to his workstation. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, the projects that would continue to transform communities, advance education, and create opportunities for those often overlooked. Every algorithm, every system, every investment carried his philosophy: power with responsibility, influence with humility, wealth with integrity. Elias's phone buzzed. Notifications, messages, congratulations from colleagues, journalists, and friends. He ignored them all. Because the quiet satisfaction of doing the right thing, of building, of persevering, of staying true, was more valuable than any headline. Later, Olivia came by, leaning against the door frame. "It's done. You've really done it." Elias smiled. "Not for me. For everyone who deserves to be seen, heard, and given a chance. That's the real success." She nodded, understanding. "You've proven something more than business acumen. You've proven what leadership can look like when it's grounded in integrity." He looked out over the city once more. The skyline sparkled, each light a reminder of dreams, struggles, and the countless people who never gave up. The city he helped shape wasn't perfect, but it was better, fairer, and more thoughtful because of choices he made when it mattered most. He whispered to himself, "The world will judge. People will doubt. Doors will close. But your worth isn't in their validation, it's in the work you do when no one's looking." The moral was clear: real triumph is not wealth, fame, or recognition. Real triumph is knowing you remain true to your values, that you lifted others while rising, and that your legacy inspires those who come after you. Elias Ward had built an empire, yes. But more importantly, he had built a story, one of resilience, integrity, and purpose. A story that would outlive contracts, headlines, and even the tallest skyscrapers bearing his unseen influence. And as the night stretched over Manhattan, the city alive beneath him, he finally felt it, the peace of a man who had faced every test, passed every challenge, and never lost himself along the way.